We will start with comments from the public regarding items not on the agenda. Yes, Wendell. Thank you.
Thank you. In reading the last issue of the other paper, I was quite concerned about what precipitated, I guess, an energetic last meeting you had. And I have been around long enough to know to be careful about newspaper articles, because I have certainly seen Bennett meetings and then read about them in the paper, and I couldn't quite recognize them as the same entity. But I have found that the other paper is usually pretty accurate, and I have confirmed independently most of what it said. And so my understanding is that significant changes in the way the elementary schools were to work were under planning or study or something, and that the board was not in that loop, and that a staff member put out an email that alerting parents. The superintendent was aware of that email and then emailed the board with a little bit of information and the fact that they might be going to have a meeting that they weren't quite planning on. This raises a series of related questions with me. One, assuming that the staff member had not sent out that email, was this something that at some point in time the board would have voted on, or was this something that would have just sort of happened? Two, if we assume that at some point the board would have voted on it, when would that have happened, and would it have come at a time when, okay, the plan has been made, school's about to open, and, well, we kind of got to have the vote now because things are in motion, and there would not be time to carefully consider it. I know that, according to the paper, Bridget asked for some background information on it, and some other board members also, and I certainly thank them all for that, because I think some is needed. I am neither for or against the plan. I am concerned that it was, from my point of view, being kept under wraps. And I know that roughly 10 years ago, the Jamaica, Vermont School District, which was one district south of where I sat on the board, identified that their students of lower economic standing were getting poorer scores in math than students as a whole, and identified this as a definite goal to bring those scores up. I saw the report of that. It was several pages long. The first page was synopsis. The copy I saw was highlighted at what a great success they had had. But I took a copy of the report home, and the pages beyond it were a lot of numbers, and it took quite a while to go through them. But I came to the conclusion that the summary was the truth, but not the whole truth. Apparently, for every point that the target group improved their standardized test scores, the rest of the class lost a point. I'm not saying it was the same plan and the same ideas that are being done here, but I would ask for caution, because people can't have two priorities at the same time. And I don't know what happened in Jamaica, but I can easily visualize what could have happened. Once teachers were assigned that they were supposed to bring this group's scores up, that group got the attention. That group, the very basic skills were likely drilled over and over and over again. The rest of the students got less attention, and very possibly, if the class normally had started here and went to here through the year, I suspect it might have started here and only gone to here, because so much time was spent on the most basic sections of it. So I find it hard to believe that a plan can really be successful without running into what Jamaica found if given individuals are said, you have to bring this set of scores up. Potentially, I think it could work if, let's say, two individuals are given a task. Individual A, your job is to bring the scores of this group of students up. Individual B, your job is to make sure that the scores of this group of students don't slip, or and maybe hopefully go up too. But I don't see how that can be, both of those jobs can be put in the hands of one, two, or more individuals. They got to be separated. So.
Wendell, can I ask you a question? Are you willing to stick around for a little bit?
Oh, I'll be
Because,
around for a while.
The agenda, right now, we didn't do the best job of delineating exactly when we were going to get into it. The superintendent's report is going to talk a little bit more to specialization when we get there.
Okay.
And so I'd love to hear more at that stage. And I know that I see some other nods in the group about wanting to discuss this a little bit further. So I think that there will be a chance when we get there. And thank you very much for your comments about the process and all of that too. Those are well taken.
Okay,
Thank
yep, I'll
you.
be around. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Any other comments from the public regarding items not on the agenda? So specialization, we would move to the superintendent's report. Yes, can you identify yourself?
My question about testing for lead in the water,
Yeah.
is there a plan for that?
David, do you have a
Hi, Andy.
answer?
Sorry, I didn't get back to you either. I know you've called me. Appreciate your inquiry about the lead. We have not, at the present time, received any specific guidance from the state on how they're gonna do that or the process by which that's gonna happen. We know that that's been a legislative act and request. We haven't seen anything formally come out yet about how they're gonna do that. I know there's been a certain amount of money proposed. I don't know exactly what's gonna be appropriated, and I'm not really sure how they're gonna do that. We, of course, have to comply with all of the current regulations around what we do. This is looking at a different standard, and so I'm not really sure. Gary, do you have anything else to add to that I'm not articulating around that?
We have not received
Yeah.
any specific
You
instructions.
currently tested 15 parts per billion that water systems are tested to?
Yeah, so I'm not able to speak articulately around all of the, the specifics around what we do. Again, we're on a municipal water system, and then obviously we have piping that comes to us, and we also have internally. So we're certainly wanting to comply with whatever happens. We also have expressed questions around where does that end, So if we do have, or a school system in Vermont has piping that needs to be replaced, where's that cost gonna come from? What about some of the other areas that need to be assessed as well, between other air quality measures or asbestos measures, et cetera? And so we've asked some questions to that. We're waiting to find out what the legislature is going to end up approving in their hand. And we know they're at close to
That
it.
was my impression, talking to
Yeah,
Katie Webb about it. One of my concerns is if there is lead in the water, it would take one test in a school to find out if there's none or any, or some.
yeah.
And then flushing the faucets every day before people drink out of it would reduce most of the lead.
Yeah, yeah, so again, we've done some things in the district, we have practices in place, we've got filtration systems, we've got different drinking fountains that we've replaced, not everywhere, but we're wanting to, pay attention to that. I'm not a water expert, I don't know even certain levels of water that's treated has some levels of, particles in them. I don't really feel that at this point we are able to
Plain
articulate.
water wouldn't have lead in the water, but there could be lead in the fixtures here.
Yeah, yeah.
And you put stuff in it. Is there anybody I could talk to find out more about it?
What's that? So we're kind of waiting from AOE and the legislature to be directed on how they want to do that. So we think that's soon to close. I mean, we're talking within days, the legislature's going to act on that.
I thought we were going to get it done by the end of the year, which to me seems like a long time to wait.
Yeah, so again, we'll have to, I'd like to be able to understand what they do, and I'd hate to have to pay current dollar, even though it may be small or large.
Talk about this some other time rather than on. school
Yeah,
board
but I
meeting.
think it's a good question. It's a legislative act that's currently before the legislature, and they've been debating it for quite some time, so,
I've talked with legislation, I talked to the state, I run the water system in Queen City Park, so
yeah.
I'm familiar with lead testing and lead. And
Do you think there's a concern
I
in
would
municipal
always
water?
test it. I don't know, this was built, the only way to know is to take a test, and tests cost $15. So seemed like it's simple to buy one for each school.
Yeah, and you gotta do every faucet, every location, and you gotta do it a certain
Hold this
period.
faucet and see if there's no lead in it, then
Yeah.
it's not a high concern. If there's lead in it, then you have a high concern.
So we wanna do everything we need to, and we wanna comply with what we think is gonna be the law that's gonna be put in place from the legislature.
What would it take in the meantime just to flush the faucets?
Which we do. I mean, again, our custodial folks are doing regular, I mean, that's an occurrence that most schools don't have, so we are doing that stuff. Well,
And that's pretty much satisfied. If we're flushing regularly, then I'm satisfied, because
yeah, I don't know if it's regular enough either, so I don't want to be careful not to say it's fully compliant, but we
I can
do
find
it.
out.
Yeah, I think we're gonna follow along. We're awaiting, I think, within the next couple of days, we're gonna get legislative act on where they're going with it. So, and I'm happy to talk to you more and maybe involve you in some of our conversations around how to do this, if, again, you're interested to help us with that.
I'm interested.
Awesome.
I think there might be a lot of other parents, especially who might be interested, and it might be worth putting it on an agenda
Yeah.
soon, if we think we're going to hear in the next few days, perhaps. So, okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for bringing that up. Any other comments on items not on the agenda? Okay, are there any amendments to the agenda?
Yeah, just that
tonight?
I added, 10 in there, under superintendent's report, the specialization piece.
Okay,
And I think that was it.
okay. All right, that brings us to the fun part of the evening.
Yeah. Go right to it.
Okay. We wanted to take a moment to recognize Arnel Husrefovich, who has been a wonderful addition to the board for the past year. And we just want to thank him for all of his work. It's been very thoughtful work and very active work within the high school to get us feedback and student voice on the board. And we really appreciate everything you've done, Arnel. And we really, really wish you the best at American University. That's very exciting. We can't wait to hear what happens next, because
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot of good things from you.
Thank you so much.
So we have a few small things for you. We have a little card, and we have
Come on
a
over
little
here.
plaque, Arnel, that says, I'll just read it. It says, South Burlington School District, in appreciation, Arnel Husrefovich. You were elected by your peers to represent them on the Board of School Directors. Your active participation and positive contributions during the past 2 years are evidence that their trust was well placed. Leadership and service qualities such as yours are assets to be valued throughout one's life. We thank you for sharing them with us. So, thank you very
Thank you
much,
so much
Arnel.
for doing
And we have just a very small gift that you're welcome to open or not
Thank you.
open now, or you can do it on, okay, all right. David says you have to open it, we'll put the pressure on to open it.
Oh, wow.
So there you go.
It's an American
Keep you warm during this extended winter, spring thing that we're having.
Wow, this is perfect. Thank you so much.
Can you hold it up again, Arnel?
Yeah, of course.
And Mom, if you'd like to come up, we'd love
Yeah,
to
come
take
on
a
up,
quick
Mom, for a
picture
quick
with
picture
you,
with us,
yeah.
that'd be great. And Alex and Brian, if you could stand in, that would be good too. Sure. We'll just take a quick picture of all of you guys together. Okay.
I'll switch.
And Kathy Murphy was his classroom teacher for him.
Yeah,
So
so
that while I was,
she
yeah,
should be
awesome.
here too.
Perfect.
No, we don't want picture. No.
Awesome. Thank you.
Wow, this is amazing.
We still gotta stay here though, we still have work to do.
Yes.
He got his gift, he's out.
Yes, and I also want to say, Martin and Elizabeth were disappointed they couldn't be here, but Delina looked at your schedule, and you guys have so many end-of-year
Yeah.
things going on that we were
Just this
worried that
week
if we
alone,
didn't do it, we would miss you, so,
Well,
Thank
thank you
you.
so much, guys.
Yeah.
I
Awesome.
appreciate
Yeah,
it.
congratulations.
Thank you.
okay. So that brings us right to Arnell's part of the, of
Yes.
the agenda, actually, announcements and student representative reports.
Yes, so obviously as I'm getting recognized and coming to an end, last night was actually the step-up night for 8th graders, so we're welcoming them into the school, and that's exciting. Last year I participated in helping out with that event. I love that event, it's always a lot of fun as an 8th grader to come. This Saturday is the annual prom, obviously. It's held this year at the Echo Center from 7 to 11 p.m. Another cool thing that happened this past weekend, the South Burlington CVU and MMU staff hockey teams played in the Josh Pelota Fun Tournament. this past weekend and raised about over $2,000 actually, which I think is really awesome. This past last week and this week have been AP exams, so those are coming to an end pretty fast, but that's going to be good for the seniors at least. And then this Thursday/Friday, tomorrow and Friday, are PLP conference days, so there is no school either of those days, as for the first time all 4 years are going to be coming in doing conferences. And then last week was Teacher Appreciation Week, and I don't think there's any better time to announce that than having Miss Murphy here, who was my first teacher. I just wanted to bring that up because I wanted to thank all the teachers that have helped me throughout the almost 12 years I've been through this district, and obviously starting with Miss Murphy, so I did want to bring that up. So thank you. And since I guess it is my last board meeting, I did just want to thank the board for allowing me to be here. And I know Cole isn't here, but I would thank him. I've had a great time working with him and with Alex last year. And I'm proud of the work we were able to accomplish with the Safety Summit and all the Climate Committee work. And I look forward to hearing what happens with all that and coming to visit again. So, and with all the master planning and visioning stuff. So lots of stuff to keep track of. But yes, thank you. And I appreciate the gifts as well. Thank you. Awesome.
A couple other just quick things. I know the board, knew of this, but we lost one of our teachers from Orchard School, one of our nurses, Susan Barry. And so I just want to recognize her. She passed away the week before last. And just wanted to recognize. She was a part-time nurse at Orchard, and she served us well, and we're sad. There are services that are coming up tomorrow evening, 5 to 7 visiting hours at the Reedy Funeral Home. And I'm at the VSA conference in Lake Maury. I'm not sure how I'll be able to do that, but that's currently what's going on. The actual, no funeral, it's going to be a kind of a closed event for them. A couple other quick things, just FYI on Rick Marcotte. Again, the property is, if you go down Market Street, first of all, Market Street's really, really quite bumpy at the moment. Again, we've talked with the city, and they're in the process. They're opening up their pavement plants, and as soon as that, Kevin actually, who's here tonight, has kind of assured us they're going to get kind of what they call a skim coat or something like that on there to help that be a little bit more accessible. Certainly, it's slow going at the moment, which isn't a bad thing to be slow, but certainly there's some debris there. I think the other part there is just the inbound and outbound while they try to do some of the structural work there is also happening. So we wanted to just let folks know that we hear them. We ask them to take some additional time if needed. Really important, that as well. And I wasn't here last Thursday. Not that you really missed me, but I was asked by the superintendent's group to go down and just talk in DC about education funding. And so I went down and back quite quickly. I'm not really a great city traveler. I told you about that, or airport traveler, but I did talk about the current president's budget around education, which has a pretty significant amount of reduction in it. And it's in the discretionary component of the federal budget, which obviously is a lot of money, but it's a small slice of the pie. Mm-hmm. And there's a fair amount of reductions, particularly in the early childhood and kind of the K-12 environment. And so I was one of 4 other panel members, and we talked specifically about some of the programs that currently we have, federal-funded programs that support education, and had the opportunity to talk about that with them. And so I just wanted to let you know that. And I think we're good. I wanted to, as you said, recognize that both Elizabeth and Martin weren't able to be here. They had other stuff going on, but and that's why we're a little bit smaller tonight. Yeah.
Okay. Any other board members have announcements of any kind? No. The only thing I'd say off the top of my head is that I heard Newsies was a great success.
Oh, yeah, it was
week.
awesome. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on, not to butt
There's
in
so
again, but,
many here.
graduation,
Yes.
I know we've got, I think most everybody now has signed diplomas. It's always an indication that the year is coming to end when we sign diplomas, although we kind of skipped, well, no, we didn't skip it. But, and then all of the culminating activities, as Arnell said, really great opportunity for our community and city folks to be involved in some really great things going on. Plays, musical performances are going to be coming up.
I have a senior challenge.
Yeah.
Presenting in a few weeks.
Yeah, our sophomore, a lot of presentations are coming up too, so I'll keep you posted.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so I think that brings us to item 7, airport sound mitigation.
Yeah, so, airport, related to sound, we, as you know, have been in pretty constant communication with the airport management, and they've been responsive. We, as you know, did our own independent sound assessment, as did the FAA at a later date. We had asked to receive all of the intricate data from that FAA sound data testing. And as we've requested that, at the same time, we've asked to move forward with all of the current kind of planning that goes on. Airport management has essentially said, we're happy, to move forward with our continued, but your continued ask to get this data that might then, you are claiming that might not be accurate, is kind of holding up us moving forward. So I will be responding back to the airport that we're okay, we want to move forward. At this point, I don't need to see the data, but we want to be able to move forward in the most expeditious way. As outlined in the letter that I gave you last meeting, and is posted up on the web, there's a fair amount of things that need to happen. I'm not going to be able to tell you all of those, but, there was all kinds of meetings that needed to be scheduled to talk about, the mechanical structures, several meetings they referenced. So there was a lot of pieces in there that were referenced in that regard. So I will respond back and say we want to move forward. At this point, I don't need to receive the data. It's our hope that this will continue to move forward as quick as possible. So I don't know what questions.
So by saying that we don't need to see the data, we're saying we don't need to see it ever, or that we just
No,
don't
I didn't
need
say
to-
that.
Okay.
I didn't say that.
Okay.
I just said it's not part of right now that we need that data. Obviously, that data exists, as does ours. We felt it was important because a lot of that data was fairly close to looking at full sound insulation or positive ventilation package. So again, we think we need to get moving forward. I don't want to hold things up. And a lot of that isn't in their control to release that. The other part of this is we're soon to get the new noise exposure maps, or what they call the NEM maps, on the new testing, or the F-35 testing. So that's also going to come into play as well. So we think it's the right step to move forward, just to make sure that they keep moving forward for us.
So who is in control of the data? The FAA is
The
in control?
FAA
Okay.
is in control of the data, and it's really their testing data that they use to conclude, qualifications related to either sound insulation or positive ventilation package examples. And again, that's based on the other data. We'll see what happens as the newer NEM data comes out. And that's based on the F-35.
And
So-
the answer about the maps is still kind of around the corner as it's been for a while.
Yeah, so May
What's it?
28th on the
May 28th?
new NEMs. Yeah, thanks, Gary.
Did you have a question? No. Okay. Do you have any more questions, Brian?
I guess one, and I don't know if there's an answer to it, but there was that strange clause in the letter that you shared with us a couple of weeks ago about the city and the school sharing 10% of the burden, the financial burden of doing any mitigation.
So in my response is identifying that as a concern.
Yeah.
Because of the cost of the scope of the project, and we have no idea what that would be. So for somebody to say, I don't really have, it's not, I'd have to bring that to you anyway, it would be a commitment of dollars. But that's an area that is ambiguous to me and not one that we can agree on. And so we're asking for additional information about how that comes into play for in a municipality. Again, there's also names the city in that as well, city and school.
Right, and so
a
how are these two
10%
different
cost
entities
share.
supposed to do
And
that?
so,
Yeah.
again, I haven't talked specifically to Kevin about it, but it's, that could be, I don't know what the scope of that, but 10% of that could be something that neither he or I have available
Yeah.
in the budget for doing that. So, again, there's some additional information that I need to get around
But so I asked for
whole deal.
clarification, but none's come yet?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I'll certainly provide you with a copy of the letter that I send and make that available as well to the public.
Yeah, thank you.
Any questions from the public on that, or comments? No. Okay. Next is city and school collaboration.
So this really, actually Kevin and I and Helen and Elizabeth have a date set for the 24th, is that right, Kevin? 24th at 10 o'clock is our next meeting. Other than that, we had on here also the stormwater to bring people up to date on where we are, and I'll let you.
Okay. So we have been working as quickly as we can in the background with our stormwater engineer. Amy O'Krellis of Stone Environmental has been doing the work that we asked her to do in talking to the city's engineers and trying to understand their constraints and their needs, as well as what our needs and desires are. She has sort of given us a preliminary in-person report on what she's found, but there are still some things that she needs to look into, partly because 10 minutes before our meeting, she got another plan from the city's engineer that she needs to review in more depth. So she didn't really have the time to get into that before she sat down with us. So she has promised to work as quickly as she can. We're hoping to hear from her probably early next week about her thoughts, and we'll have to go from there. So we're working as quickly as we can to try to resolve what we think would be the best thing for the school, and to then work those issues out. Ideally, she said that she would try to work as quickly as she could. She could even potentially have some information for us by Friday when you sit down with the city, and we'll just keep moving forward as quickly as we can. Any other thoughts, questions? City folks, anyone?
Speed is good.
Can you share what she said to you recently?
Not yet, because she's now reviewing more plans. So we need to understand what those plans are, and
She was one of the 5 that met, right? in that
yes,
meeting
she
for
was.
engineers.
Yes, she was. Yes, she was.
And I don't exactly know the time of it, but right before it, it was probably somewhere around, 5:30 or something, 5:15. She got an email from
Paul Westford.
Paul.
Yeah.
And it was a drawing and provided additional information. She did the best she could to read it off of her phone, but, there was definitely some treatment practice and storage that were being outlined, and she was doing her best to try to answer some of the questions to the board. She didn't allude to that it was complicated, hard to read, and she was trying to do it in the moment. So I think what she said, as Bridget said, she's going to work hard to try to get some feedback and get it back to the board as quick as possible. And, we're going to also talk about how we can have schedule a meeting in the most appropriate way with all with board members that can be there. So that's kind of where we are. Yeah.
If indeed what she comes back with meets with your approval and makes sense and and reflects the consensus of the engineers, if that is the case, are we close to being ready to get this thing figured out and be able to move forward? And I know, after last I sound like a broken record, but the clock is ticking, and time is of the absolute essence on this project, because we go too far down the road, we got a problem with the new city center, with the new community center project.
We've
So
heard
is
your
that-
concerns. We've heard your concerns, and we're working as quickly as we can. And as to be clear, what David meant when he said looking for a time when the board can meet, we're actively looking for a time outside of our next meeting, which is not until June 6th. We're looking to see if there's a time where we could meet to approve something if the pieces all come together. But we don't have a specific date set yet. No. All right, moving right along. Superintendent's report.
So I have on here, and I'll continue to do this even at the next one too, but just again, because we've been talking about specialization, and I know from folks from the previous meeting, the word departmentalization got out, and, I'm saddened that, we're kind of needing to backstep a little bit, but, bottom line is our schools, our district is trying to address what I would say, outcomes related to our students, and we're really been working hard for a long time around professional development, around looking at ways in which we can do that. Again, we're really fortunate from the city community, I should say, city community, parents, guardians, who have been patient with us around our late starts and early dismissals so we can do the things that we need to do as a staff to continue to grow. In the area of specialization, I have said that I want to be able to move forward. I've created and have just recently met with all of the teachers. Again, I'm not with the teachers every day, not that I can't be, but I'm not with them. The administrators are. I outlined what I call the implementation criteria or implementation checklist. And part of the success of moving forward is to make sure that all of the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. And we started this some time ago, but we're working through that criteria. And I have to say that we're not where we need to be. Obviously, the big components are, do the teachers understand and have questions responded to? We have varying levels of success in that particular area. Are parents informed and had the opportunity to have feedback been provided? Again, not so much in our, and again, you're hearing some of that as well. Our timeline was definitely to be farther ahead than we are today. And so what's important for people to hear from me is that if we haven't done those things, then we're not moving forward. That doesn't mean that we're not going to continue to work to identify ways in which we can improve. So I think what people need to know is that if they have, again, I'll be more specific around the actual direction. Some schools are able to do, some school perhaps is able to take on a little bit more. Some are not there. So I'll be able to, again, after today, I met with the Rick Marcotte folks today, I met with the Chamberlain folks yesterday, and I met with Orchard on Monday. And again, wanted them to hear from me, also wanted to be able to then discern from the administrator, where are you at? And I was initially looking for some teachers or grade levels to be able to begin this process. But I'm not going to allow for that to begin if we haven't been clear with parents, clear with teachers, clear with the design of our special schedule. So again, I think there's a pretty reasonable interpretation of what I'll say a pause around the implementation, but it's not off the table. A continuous improvement team is a big part of what we do and what we're required to do in the state. And although we have good outcomes, we definitely have some concerning outcomes. And this comes right back to our ends. And it's not just the academic, but our ends are not where they should be around outcomes. Again, we are a good district. We do really well in the state. We're highly recognized, but we definitely have areas that we need to improve upon. And so you asked me, through you evaluating of me, how we're going to do that. And this is one area that I think we need to look into and respond to. And we're going to keep working at it. It may look a little bit different, next year at one school than another, and we'll take that data and we'll continue to use that as important evidence on how to move forward. But there's some things in here that are like non-negotiable, I would say. You need to have a continuous improvement team, right? That's kind of a non-negotiable. That needs to be established, and that needs to be a major component for making decisions within your school around a specific target. I definitely will need to be clear once we have more information from the administrators on how we're going to do that and what are some of the critical gates around how we're going to move forward. And I don't have that at the moment, but I want people to be a little bit at ease that, number one, we're a district that cares about all students. We want all students to be successful. We have many, many attributes that we're doing and programs that we're currently deploying to try to help them. And you've heard some of those from diversity, equity, and inclusion, our mindfulness practices, right? Responsive classrooms. So we have a lot of programs currently running in addition to then our content areas that we're pushing as well. So those are all critically important, not going away. But some of the challenges, as we know, is for a classroom teacher, having a deeper understanding and trying to stay on top of that game, particularly in math or literacy, is not always easy. That doesn't absolve them from still being knowledgeable, because when the students go between each other, they're gonna still need to be able to have, that obviously the math language that you're using or vice versa is critically important. So, we're hopeful, and again, a lot of this is guided by the MTSS practices that have been around, the field guide that's been around for a long time. And, we're trying to dig into that data, but that continuous improvement team, really, the big part of that is to look at that data, to look at how we're making progress, what are the areas that we're not, why aren't we, what are we going to continue to do, up to including how does our budget respond to those things in a sequenced way. I recognize that the way our timeline was working was in juxtaposition with, parent communication. And that was not the intent. Our intent was earlier in the year to be farther ahead and be farther ahead on where we are. We continued the conversation because we felt that's good professional practice, right? We need to be thinking about how we're gonna close this gap. And I think there should have been a pause put on to say, time out. We better pause, right? And but I do have some schools that are more ready in some grades to do some things, and so I want to allow that to happen around looking at ways to improve. And again, our budget's always been semi-flexible to make sure that we're meeting needs of our students. Again, we have our district curriculums, obviously, those are not different, but somehow our differences, certainly from our high school to our middle school to our elementary, are a little bit different in how we do that. So I'm happy to answer questions. I hope I'm putting people at ease that, parents that haven't been communicated, I don't think they should be worrying. There's a more delineated plan that needs to be shared around how to go forward. Classroom teachers still have questions. Again, we had a fair amount of hopes and dreams, a lot of really positive things about this come out, and there's still some questions and concerns. So we have to dig through that, as I said in this. Our teachers and staff need to make sure that they're on board with it. And certainly at a couple of our schools, Orchard and Rick Marcotte, they're not, right? And so one of the things that I've said to the staff is they are our engines of our schools, our teachers, and I need them to be on board. I need them to understand kind of why we're working towards this end, as we always have, and we're going to keep working at it. So I don't know what questions board members have or community have.
I have a couple of buckets of questions, and I'll try to keep them shorter than last time. But one of them is around specialization itself, but one of them is about the process. And this goes to what Wendell was saying. I'm struggling a little bit, and maybe this is because I'm I'm sort of in the middle in terms of tenure on the board and work within policy governance. I'm struggling because this is, in my mind, a very significant shift in how we're managing our elementary schools and what we're doing. And it's a struggle for me because I'm trying to understand how major changes like this fit in with policy governance, because I was very surprised by this, and that doesn't feel okay to me if I'm supposed to be helping guide the work of the district. And clearly I'm not an educator, but it's just, I really want us to take a step back and talk about process, and maybe, we need to have a different meeting to do that where we're more prepared to do it, but we need to talk about process for some of these major shifts, and when the board is brought into that, and how the board's concerns or questions feed into that process. Because what I'm hearing you say is that you're having frustrations with the implementation of it. My frustrations are earlier in that chain of how we make that decision to do it in the first place, and how we make the decision at several levels. So how we decide that this is the right way to address this equity gap, how we decide that there really is a significant equity gap, because last fall when we talked about SBAC data, I said, this seems a little more on the surface than we've had in the past. In the past we had dived down pretty deep into issues of free and reduced lunch and how those different kids are doing at different schools. And we had gotten a little deeper into the data, and I was kind of told, well, we're going to do that analysis. I sort of said to the senior administrators who presented that to us, where what do you see in this data? So I see sort of things moving around in this data. It's a little unclear to me what it means in terms of our outcomes on this particular measure. And I was told at some other meeting, we will get deeper into that. And I don't feel like I really had that until last meeting, where we really said, okay, here's this huge equity gap. That wasn't really something that I felt like was at the forefront of my mind as one of our priorities. And it may have been in the background, but I feel like there's somewhere a communication breakdown and just a sort of breakdown in how we're all working together on some of these bigger issues. So that was a whole bunch of questions wrapped into one. But one of them really is sort of how, within the policy governance context, does the board weigh in on these decisions? We can't sort of just be sitting on the sidelines and being told this is what we're doing as a district and our problem is really with implementation. We really need to somehow be in the process earlier than that.
Well, it's pretty transparent from my perspective that, that's on me, Bridget, right? So.
Well, and I'm not trying to criticize you. I'm just
it's
saying
all
that
right.
as a district and as an
it's fine. I think
organization, we need
it's
to
fair.
align a process that sort of
No, it's a fair.
make sure they're not surprises, or make sure that that there is some input from, because we're supposed to be representing the community. We're supposed to be representing the people who, put us here. And if we're sort of told what's happening without having any weigh in, it feels very uncomfortable.
Yeah. So I think you're absolutely right. It's, faulty in the process by how the board learned about it. I think it likely lacks the transparency that you should have before this particular initiative would even begin to move forward. So I take responsibility for that. Again, I've been doing this for a while, but I want to say to you that there are a lot of things that happen in the city and the school that in some cases I always have to discern whether or not this is something I should let you know of or not. You ask me to try to do the things that I need to do, otherwise then you should simply just do my job. But there are times when, as I inform you via email of things that might be happening, and I have to make a decision on this is a level that I think is important that you know about. For instance, and I could go down the road of saying, we're changing our math program. We're going to move to Bridges' math program, or whatever the case may be. That's under policy governance. That's not really under that's not really with you. However, I have to anticipate, is this potentially a concerning issue that I think you should know about? Because classroom teacher, parent, whomever might come to you. And if the answer to that is yes, then I probably should say, hey, I just want to let you know. That's always good. Or literacy, or new science standards, or I can go on with, or airport, or, other city stuff. I can go on, and that's a judgment on my part. Part of my work with the staff and the administrators is try to make sure we're doing everything we can to continue to be an improving district, continuous improvement. And some of those things that we're doing administratively to learn and to support, whether it's diversity, equity, inclusion, or mindfulness practice, those didn't come before the board, but we certainly, in some cases I provided some FYIs, probably not a lot. And probably as I look back on some of those, we probably should have let you know some of those. This is one area that I definitely, I would say, faltered on. Again, I'm a parent, but I'm feeling a little distant, probably as an elementary parent. Should have come back and say, no, administrators, this is a big issue. We better put the brakes on well before we go any further. And so I own that. I definitely own that. And I think those are important reflections that come back to me around the process. There's a lot of moving parts, as you know, in our work, and the things that happen in our school district. But certainly this is an important one. It's about the delivery of our work. Again, in some places in our district, we have had this going on for a long time, right? And so I interpreted it probably wouldn't be that big of a situation. And probably should have run that around the horn with some of my fellow administrators, like, well, tell me more. Probably should have inquired with some of the parents a little bit more, but, I didn't. And so it doesn't change the need for our response. We definitely need to respond, and I've kind of informed you that the brakes are on. It doesn't mean that we're off on continuing to improve and looking at ways to do that. And I want to see continuous improvement teams established. I want to hear more from the staff on how they're going to be advancing. I think a major component of this is a form of specialization. And again, as I spoke with the teachers, and I think it generally makes sense, is that, years ago in education, you were a classroom teacher, you did a lot of additional things. And we're really fortunate and lucky that we have talented kind of specialists in music and art and physical education and, that provide those types of supports for us, reading. And so again, this is kind of, from my perspective, was a little bit of some additions of that, but not significantly changing. I'm extremely, and people who've heard me over the years talk about the importance of relationship is my kids would say, what's that always talk about? Always talks about relationships. So I believe that's so important. I'm not wanting to take any bit of that away. And in fact, I believe that our students that go to our art and music and physical education, our bus drivers and our nutrition service folks, they have really, really important relationships that add to the kind of the fabric of the children's future. So I think in summary, I get it. I think Wendell's right. Missed opportunity to inform the board, understand the process by which change would happen in these bigger buckets, connected to our continuous improvement plan. And I think there's a need for a circle back around our continuous improvement plan and how we're going to, again, in dispositions, in personal development, in academic, and in citizenry, how we're moving on those things. And some of those you may say, that's great. We don't really need any more information. But in some of these, I think we need more information. So can you give us some more insight on that as opposed to roll it out? So I get it. I own it. And again, we can improve. So.
Yeah, I think part of the struggle is that we've talked so much about ends metrics and trying to get at how we're doing. And what I heard in your initial sort of take on this was that there were ends that, other than potentially just the SBAC scores, that we're doing well on and others that we're not. And I just struggle as a board member because the ends are sort of how we are supposed to, be weighing in. Are we meeting those ends? And I don't feel like we have that information. Like, at least I don't feel like it's been clear to me necessarily yet. And that I heard from Mike the other night. I was very encouraged when he kind of came and talked about how we are starting to get our hands around some larger assessments other than just standardized testing, but that's still coming. And so that's why I'm struggling, because it feels like maybe you guys are working with different information than we have to.
No, the standardized assessments, as you know, and it's I don't want to crutch on that. It's changed over the years from NECAP to SBAC, and and those correlative data sets don't always match up. We also have a lot of our own data, and this is what I said on our formative data. And those of you who have been around, our teachers have what we call data walls, which look at, the students' growth over time and where they're at. And so those are very visible components of where kids are for us and how we're going to help them along the way. Those are kind of the components that I was talking about. And again, they're all our kids, and I'm overly probably sensitive to making sure that, we need to ensure that as kids move on, that they have the assets that they need to be successful. I worry about the students that feels that they're not there, right? And that, as you know, as you move through a system, as you get older, it can become more internalized to say, I'm not as good as or able as, and then there's other implications that can become majorly in play. So I want to make sure that our system is doing the very best we can with the resources that we have, or I need to be, reconfiguring those resources or asking for more. And again, as I said to the teachers, I talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and that's, again, that foundation, the bottom of the triangle, is all about those basic needs. And I kind of lump those into the relationship components. Kids need to feel safe. They need to feel able and trusted, right, with they need to have all of their basic needs met. And we know that's critically important, and that has become definitely much more of a challenge for our teachers and staff, because kids are coming to us sometimes with more dysregulated behaviors. And it's harder for our classroom teachers necessarily to get to the content because it's so critical to establish that foundation. And so part of this work is not taking that away, maintaining that strength and even strengthening it more, because we've added some to that, right? I've added, diversity, equity, inclusion. We've added, kind of mindfulness practices. We've added some of the trauma-informed practices, right? We've been working at that. Those are the foundational pieces. It takes time, takes skills. The next level up, though, gets into the content, obviously, and it's also hard to keep track of making sure we're providing all that we need to as well. So again, big job for teachers. I recognize that. I'm trying to be sensitive to that. I'm also trying to recognize individuals whom we have in our system, many of them, who, like you, around the table and in the room, have really prominent credentials in math, from master's degrees in mathematics to Vermont, VMI Math, the Vermont Math Institute, who have spent years in the content of math, and I'd like to be able to recognize and deploy that, similar to the way we do with our math and reading coaches today. So it's, again, I'm definitely pushing, which is not often like me. I'm pushing on the administrators to have the teams to help come up with where their data is and what they need to do. And that's more where the push needs to be, is to establish that and make sure there's buy-in from all of the people around. So, again, that's where we are. And again, I think for people who are listening or here, I have a checklist. We're not there in many places. It's not that we're not going to continue, but there's critical components. So I think the implementation currently, likely at Rick Marcotte or Orchard is they've got work to do on their implementation of their continuous improvement teams. If there is a volunteer that comes through that the teachers are on board and the families are on board, I probably would consider that. That's kind of this week's end work and early next week. I'm not feeling that that's probably going to be the case. It probably will be an implementation more at Chamberlain, who's been doing this for a while, and we'll continue to figure out how we want to move forward, again, based on the continuous improvement process.
So I guess if I could, I wanted to follow up on Bridget's process question. And I may have been on the board for all of 2 months, and I'm about to discuss all of 2 data points, so take it with a grain of salt.
Yep.
But this process reminded me of the proposed 5th grade move to middle school 4 years ago, in that it concerned elementary kids, and it came out kind of late in the spring, and people felt like they were kind of caught by surprise. And so part of that is just, more openness, and you sort of see earlier on what gets pushed back, and then, okay, you can push out more information. With this process right now, with this MTSS, we talked a couple of weeks ago about having more information both for the board and the public, and so I was curious about how that was going. But I think in the vacuum left by not providing that, what we're seeing are these rumors about, it's actually departmentalization and not specialization, or we're seeing community members writing in that have done their own literature search. Or in my case, I read the one PDF that was provided in the information that you gave to us 2 weeks ago, and my conclusion from that was the one exemplar district among the 12 that were studied had a special education teacher training up the general ed teachers, and wasn't actually like what you're proposing. So, I mean,
Right.
I think when you
Different
don't
models,
provide that information, this is the sort of thing that happens with me and with the community and with everybody,
Yep. Fair.
So are we close, though, to getting some more stuff from you or Mike or the administration or whatever to
Yeah, and
understand?
part of that is, again, as I have said, we need to get teachers on board with where they're at before we step out and do more too at the present time. And so, again, in the implementation, and we want to be clear about what it is that we're putting out. Again, the data sets and the MTSS work and the DMG report that the state has done is in part probably the biggest piece. And if you look at the research components connect to that, we just need to make that, I think, more available, the MTSS work and the DMG, because there's all kinds of other data pieces in there. And again, what I've been doing currently is just getting with the administrators to make sure and then the classroom teachers, I felt it important for me to get out and be able to share and listen before we push anything more out and create any more additional confusion or data points. So there's definitely been a pause currently with that.
The pause in the
for board.
process is
Sorry.
yeah. The pause in the progress, I think, is probably smart, but I do hope there's not a pause in trying to provide more information to folks.
Nope. I think there is not, and I think the more we can talk about this as a community is going to be good. Again, it should not be in a silo, where we are as a school district and the data. And I know, Bridget, you're right. Our ends data, as people know, it's not just academic, but it's the, personal development, disposition for lifelong learning, and citizenship. Those are all critical components to that. And as you know, we've been working hard on establishing those metrics or the numbers that go along with that. And again, I think you've heard from Mike, and we're pushing on that as well, so that we have a more articulate, picture of where we are. So, anyway.
I'm still just struggling. Who is the right, is there someone to come talk to us and or to parents? Is it Joanne Godek? I mean, who's the right person to come? Because I keep hearing from you that there's a problem with implementation and that people just aren't on board yet. And that's one aspect if everyone's kind of convinced that it's the right thing to do. But I'm still struggling with getting an understanding of why it's the right thing to do. And I think a lot of parents have the same question.
Mm-hmm.
And so my question is still just, how do we get that information out? Do we set up another meeting, just to talk about this with the community? How do we, it's not just a matter of hitting pause for now, but it's still coming, and just worry about it. Because that's as a parent, of one of the schools where it's not happening yet, it's just sort of hanging out there,
okay.
So Chamberlain's going to do it, and we'll just sort of watch, and then, but ours is coming. But yeah, it would be good to sort of put a stake in the ground and say, we're going to have Joanne or Mike or both or, whoever it is. Because I hear you on continuous improvement plans, and that's obviously something that's been happening, and that's something that the state requires, and that's good for everybody. But that doesn't, to me, necessarily mean specialization specifically. That means we're looking at all the different things that could potentially happen and choosing what the right answer to a certain problem is, and there are lots of different problems, so we're addressing lots of different things. So I'm still just not hearing the why about specialization. I'm still hearing a lot about why people aren't on board or why they've not done the work yet. And so I'm still struggling with that.
Yeah.
So I'm imagining that other people are probably still struggling with that a little bit. So I just
Well, I think
would
we-
like to hear more of a commitment
we-
to what we can do to try to help people understand exactly what specialization is, why it is what we've chosen as a district to be the answer to this equity gap.
So I think, again, good point. I think we can set up a way to share with you some of the most specific research that has helped us, and again, the MTSS work and why it points to that and why it articulates and leads to that. And again, I want to be clear, we have a lot of that going on currently, right? We have a lot of specialization currently going on in our system now, whether you're a special educator, right? Whether you're a reading teacher, we have some of those specializations currently going on. But what we know is that the most knowledgeable individual is critically important to help disseminate the information to students, while at the same time maintaining the relationship and the criticalness of the exchange. And again, the multi-tiered systems of support is really all about that. And again, a lot of people, again, have said, well, David, aren't you kind of specializing in our schools today? The answer to that is yes. We definitely do. It happens a little bit different in each of our schools. And so we're really trying to take advantage of the knowledge, of the skill sets that we have to make sure that we're helping the students the most effective way that we can. And the MTSS report, again, is riddled with kind of those methodologies around how best to do that. And again, it's a heavy lift, and it's continued to be identified as a heavy lift for classroom teachers, particularly in the math and literacy content, to try to do it all. And so this, what I'll say, a little bit of specialization area is in fact trying to ensure that students are able to reach their highest potentials, for the kids that are, doing well, to reach higher, and the kids that are not, to bring that up. Again, we have some of our data sets are as low as 35% of our kids are meeting or exceeding the standard, 35. So the other side is that they're not. And again, that's reported as we're being a good district, but these are some of our subsets. And so we're trying to address why is that and how can we help, looking more deeply. So your answer is I think, again, once the administrators and I are on board with where we're going, I can communicate that back out to the board. We're gonna set up some specific meetings to share some of the rationale and allow for that to be received, and then to continue, to be thoughtful on how we move forward.
Sorry, Alice, I haven't turned to you. Do you have questions or?
Sure, yeah, I do think that it's good that the conversation continues on it, even if action is not taken. And I also think that, like with that MTSS, that more evidence needs to be brought out to show that this is the right thing to do. And I've seen, people saying, hey, there's no evidence that this is the right thing to do. But if there is evidence, that needs to be brought out. And it shouldn't be just, brought out to the administrators. It should be brought out publicly. And perhaps we could even continue this conversation, or maybe include it in the superintendent's report for.
No, I think it's right that
future
it gets,
board reading-
I think
board
it's right that it gets its own agenda item, and,
Yeah, okay.
and I think it's right that we engage, our community, parents into the conversation.
Yeah.
And I think my hopeful outcome is that we're gonna begin to be more watchful and to address, and to be a district that's really, moving things forward in a more positive way. And again, I want to, as I said to the teachers, we're a really good district. We have extremely caring teachers, and we have extremely caring parents and guardians. And it's not because of that. It's really to address how we can continue to improve on some of those areas.
So, yeah, big changes need everybody on board, and sometimes that takes persuasion, or just, not persuasion, but
Yeah.
presentation of the evidence.
Yeah. So I definitely hear that. I think it's fair that, through the principals to the staff and to the parents is probably the next needed kind of communication articulation. I want to be careful that I want to talk to them. Obviously, I've received feedback from the teachers, all of them just recently. I haven't been able to circle back to all the administrators. I basically want to give them my feedback on where we are, where they are with their schools and staff and parents. And I want to be able to say, we've got to be articulate back to the staff and back to your parents. I'd like that to happen with them. Maybe that's a letter from me to them and then them out. But I want to be really thoughtful. I recognize that this is, a concerning thing, and as I said at the last meeting, I'm proud that we have parents and guardians that are asking the questions. And I apologize for kind of the, little misstep here, not little, misstep with process. So, yeah.
Just one more question. I think earlier we were talking about how it was not going to be done at Marcotte and
Well,
Orchard.
I said that, and again, I'm trying to be really sensitive to, my meetings in these last 3 days.
Right.
I don't believe there's individuals currently from my read on things that I've got buy-in from teachers.
Yep.
And questions have been answered. Part of the criteria was there had to be information success around that delivery. Now, am I going to make everybody happy every time? Of course not.
Right.
But I want to make sure that I can go through with every school and check off and know that those are established. In some cases, the continuous improvement teams weren't established, right? So those are noticeable buckets that are timeout, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So did I misunderstand that this is going to be implemented at Chamberlain, or is that not correct?
Currently, it already is
Okay.
happening at Chamberlain. We already have specialization that's been going on for some years. It was to work to expand that, and again, right now, they're doing it pretty much kind of 3 through 5. So there's I'll see where they're at in their work. I'm less interested in the lower grades. I think that those, the core time with the classroom teacher in kindergarten in 1, I think is critically important. That probably it's only the classroom teacher and the art and the music and the physical education. But I think that at this point, that's not really my interest at this time,
Okay.
or our interest at this time. It's really looking at more of those upper continuum grades.
Okay.
Yeah, kind of the 3, 2, 3,
3,
4,
4,
5.
5, maybe 2.
Maybe 2, depending.
Okay.
But again, I'm just because somebody wants to do it, like I want to do it, I want to be able to know where you're at with all of these other things, school. Like, have you communicated with the parents? Where are they at?
Yep.
Have you had your continuous improvement team? where are you at with those? And so I'm requiring some of the artifacts of that to be able to be there. Again, I'm trying to be sensitive all at the same time on the, to the administrators and where they are. And again, each school, as you know, every teacher's a little bit different, every administrator's a little bit different in where they're at. But we, as a district, are trying and asking the hard questions around how we can be a district that continues to improve. I'd love to be able to say sometime in the near future, I don't know when that will be, but that we have significantly closed the gap and that all kids are reaching the highest potential. And we're dealing with some of the things that we know are important, whether it's anxiety in school and some of those things in a better way. So we're asking the question, we're trying to do it. I get the process. I hear you loud and clear.
Do we have questions from the public or comments from the public before we move on? Yep.
I have a suggestion to help answer this question of whether this is the most, effective method. You have 3 through 5 doing this already at Chamberlain, it sounds like. So why don't you use statistical analysis to compare those grades in 3 through 5 to Orchard score, all these outcomes that you have, that you're looking at to Orchard and in Central, grades 3 through 5, and over the next few years, see if you're getting the results that you want. I mean, that's a simple way to see if this specialization is working. You have the test subjects right there.
So you're not wrong in that. And again, part of that information is what is informing our decisions, that we think that what's happening there has significance. We also think that the preparation and planning and the professional development that's needed to stay on top of, all of the things that a classroom teacher needs to do is also part and play to that. So we are watching that. And again, I think the biggest piece here is how we can effectively narrow that gap. And so there is some data that we've been looking at. And we want to, again, we feel like it's an important next step. Presently, as I said, process, trying to really affirm before we take the next step, there needs to be some some deliberate things that need to happen. And
But why go ahead with something before you know it's going to be effective when you can just test it right there and see?
well, remember, what we're doing is essentially doing exactly what we're doing now, but asking for the individual who has the most or the highest level of expertise and the willingness to go deeper to be that person, right? Similar to, in any content area, we have people, as I said, in our system that have a higher level of expertise in that area. And so it would be if you have somebody, in the 4th grade, classroom teacher that has a higher level of expertise in math, right? Then likely if it was our neighbor or our friend, we'd say, hey, can you help so-and-so out with this? Again, just because you have the knowledge doesn't mean that you can disseminate it either. But again, those are part of that's part of what we're trying to get at, to allow that to happen, while at the same time, that whole preparation. So there are some successes going on. As far as fidelity across the district, we don't have that, right? We don't have the same configurations, the same number of students in our different schools.
But you could use that.
Yep, I hear you.
Training time to do a different, something different that could be more effective if you find out whether specialization is not the answer just by comparing those two. You said you have the data from 3 years. Look at the data, see if it worked before you waste time spending all this time training teachers on something that's not worked. You have the data. You've collected data for 3 years. Look at the data that you have for these 3 years and see, are these kids at Chamberlain, are their scores better? You actually already have this data. So you can actually look at this data and see if those kids' scores went up. If they didn't go up over these 3 years, this isn't the right thing to use. So use all that money and do something else.
Yeah. Well, again, it's not additional money. We're not spending any more,
You're
right?
doing all this education of specialization.
Well, we're already-
on all these Tuesdays that we're picking up, on Fridays. that
We're already doing it, though. I mean, that's again part of, we're having
something
all
else,
teachers
because
do.
This won't be the right thing because it hasn't worked in Chamberlain if the scores aren't better. You have the data, just look at it.
And we are, we'll continue to do so.
Feedback
Yeah,
received
I
on that
appreciate
one.
it.
Do we have other questions or comments? Yes.
I just wanted to say thank you for pausing. I'm really happy to hear that because everything you already said, and I echo a lot of the other comments that the board has made in terms of, I really just want to see the research that, the data and the research that brought you to this conclusion that specialization is the right way to go. I still, when we met 2 weeks ago, I still wonder why, if you haven't looked at the Orchard co-teaching model, because you mentioned that there's specialization happening at, differently at each school, and then maybe that's what you're calling specialization there. And I just would really beg you to look at that model, because every parent I've talked to who's had a kid go through those classrooms has sung its praises. But
Yeah, the co-teaching model.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I really, agree with what Bridget said in terms of, so what's gonna happen during this pause? I think that's really important. I'm not just relieved and say, okay, we're done here. I really wanna understand when we're gonna have that parent input meeting, and when the teachers are gonna get input, when we're gonna get the research, and let's just, kind of take the necessary steps to avoid this misstep that you mentioned earlier, and
I hear
so
you.
everyone can feel good about what's
I
happening.
definitely owe that to the board and parents. I want to do that also in concert with the administrators. Again, I need to circle back to them. I need to affirm where they are and what they're thinking, and then we need to get out some communications that's consistent, and informative, which is what you're asking for, right? And what we're going to do next. And I think, I'm hearing you loud and clear. We want to make sure that people are on board, they're informed, the data's there. To the best of our ability, the data's there that supports it. And, I'm going to ask that we all work to get on the same page to help all kids, our high learners to be higher, and our students that aren't, that we can be successful. Our data currently, again, as I said, in the state is really good, but it's not good enough, right? And again, I've been using with the staff the 80-20, and in some cases that's much higher than it actually is. But that concerns me. So again, it's part of my desire is to close that and to figure out the best ways to do it, and certainly research and best practice. I need to be able to articulate that to you with some of that. So I get it.
Yeah, and I just want to, think after you articulate or provide that information, I think the input meeting would be really helpful as well.
And just as a starting point, does somebody like Corey have the capacity to do a little bullet point on the district
could.
website? Because there are things that you've said tonight that were interesting for me. I didn't know that it had already been happening at Chamberlain. I didn't know that you weren't really thinking about K-2. And I think just learning that would have answered a couple of the questions from the audience 2 weeks ago. And so if there's any way to put out the DMG report and what you're thinking about, I think that could answer a lot of the concern and interest that's out there.
Yeah, so definitely Corey can definitely help. It's, I've got to make sure there's, again, we've got a lot going on right now. Again, also hence part of the concerns, right? We got a lot going on, and Arnell highlighted a lot going on even at the high school, the culminating piece. So, here we are, mid-May, and so we definitely we owe it to get out some of that. So Corey can absolutely help, but the administrators and the building administrators with a concrete message that is also going out, can help too. So I hear you.
Okay.
We're going to do everything we can to do that.
Okay.
Appreciate the
Any
feedback.
last questions? Yeah.
Since it is already happening at Chamberlain, can you describe what they're doing? Because I don't know.
Yeah. So they actually have specialization going on at some of the grades. So there's a classroom teacher that will teach the science and the math, and then the other side is teaching the literacy side. And so there's no, there's more than that. I don't exactly know all the grades off the top of my head. I have it written, but I'm not going to be able to be totally accurate on that. But so we have some examples of that. The pool of students, of course, unless you're going to, that whole test and the data piece is often hard to see, in comparison. Again, our Chamberlain kids do quite well. The population is a little bit different than our other two schools. So, you have to be careful of that too, because if you simply say that's not working and remove it, well, where would they have been if you were doing it the same way as the others? So again, remember, specialization isn't anything different on the delivery of our curriculum. We're still teaching the same curriculum and all of the required components by grade level. It's asking a classroom teacher who has those additional skills to do that, right? Also helps a little bit with preparation, and some of those things. So again, I think that's part of this, is to say what's currently going on and how is that going, right? And so give that feedback back and let some of those classroom teachers and parents also collaborate. And it might be in the end that people are like, it's awesome, so I get it. There's some missteps and opportunities that I need to provide, including kind of what we're currently doing.
In terms of looking at the data from Chamberlain, I don't think necessarily it needs to be compared to, I think you could compare within Chamberlain, like how was everything going before this all started versus now. I agree, I don't think it makes sense to be like, oh, how is the school doing versus this?
Yeah.
But like just, over this time, has it achieved the ends that you were hoping it would achieve there?
Yeah.
To see whether you're closer to those goals, whatever they may be.
Yeah, your point's right. I've worked hard not to necessarily isolate a school or a grade, but we definitely we've definitely been trying to work hard through our budget process to provide the resources in some cases where some of the needs are higher. But I hear what you're saying around that.
Okay, thank you. So moving on, we're a little behind schedule, but I think that some of these are going to be shorter than we had envisioned. So master planning and visioning, we are looking to schedule tours for the board members who need them. So some board members are reaching out directly to Pat and Karsten. Others are trying to sort of work together to find a time to go. I don't know where you are, Brian.
My schedule is very flexible now that UVM is out of session, so I'd like to glom on to anybody who will have me.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't heard from Martin yet. Elizabeth, I think, was hoping to do the high school at the end of next week. She's not back until the end of next week, and Karsten's gone at the end of next week. So it'll probably have to be 2 separate days just because of schedules. Karsten and Pat both have graduating seniors from college, so they're off on different graduation visits. So we're working on that, working again on that schedule, and we're working on scheduling a master planning focused meeting. Because
Likely after the tours.
Maybe after the tours. Mainly that would be the meeting where if faculty were going to come or, other administrators were going to come and sort of talk to us about, their concerns or, the opportunities they see for the various different options. That would be the meeting, to sort of get just a little bit more in person, because all of you had asked me how I came to the position that I find myself in at this moment, and it was really spending time with the faculty and being part of that process. So we wanted to help recreate that just in a small bit for the rest of the board. So we're working on finding a date for that before our June 6th meeting. That's the main thing, because as we discussed last time, June 6th is kind of getting to the point where we need to make a decision if we're going to really have some design work and some community input and that kind of thing over the summer and fall, and really not lose an entire year. So that's where we are with master planning and visioning. Did I forget anything, David? Or is that pretty much?
No, I think just, those school visits are important. I'm again, as Bridget said, I'm just worried about that getting I'd like not to have to do, have them do, you've already gone on the visits, and maybe you'd like to tag along again, but I just would like to try to get those established. I'm happy to help in any way you can. I'm fine for you to reach out to Patrick and Karsten, and copy myself and Delina. We can then say, Patrick or Karsten will say, Alex is coming 1 hour after, can we combine them? Or whatever. But I just think getting that email out as soon as possible is really important. Because as Bridget said, the June is coming.
June is coming, and the administrators themselves have a lot of year-end different work, and so they're trying to hold time for us, but also, if we're not going to use it, move along to other things that they can be doing, other appointments they can schedule. So, it'd be great if over the next couple of days, really, we could nail down some times. So.
Well, I would love to hear from faculty, but my sample size is very small. I've only talked to a few faculty members, but they're all heavily in favor of it. Is that generally In favor of doing a larger
Well, I think-
intervention to do more
No, I
for
think-
education.
It's more hearing about what a
Cer-
larger
yeah.
intervention would do for them and how it would change, what they're doing, or how it would improve what they're doing, or how what they're doing right now is bumping into the building and the level of that problem. Because it's hard to quantify that problem. We don't have data that says, X number of students sat in the hallway today to work on their group projects or whatever. So it's kind of more of a qualitative discussion with faculty. So we were hoping that might be helpful as the last kind of data point. In
Yeah, and
addition
we would bring some of that, but it should be an open, I think, staff that would come, teachers, administrators, they probably would give a little bit of a quick synopsis of what they bump into, what they see,
Yeah.
but be available to you to ask then questions as a group, and, you're hearing each other, and what else do you need, kind of thing.
The other thing is that the faculty members that we would have in mind would be the ones who have been on visits to Massachusetts and could give a little bit more of, another angle on what they saw or what they thought as they were going on those visits and that kind of thing. The other thing I did forget was we did get today the draft of Phase 2 from Dorr and Whittier, the report. So that should be circulated pretty soon. I wanted to have a look at it, and Gary's having a look at it as well. But you guys should have that in hand
Was
pretty
this what you
soon.
sent by email the other day?
I think it was today, wasn't it?
Oh, was it today? Yeah, that
I
was
think it was
some
today,
enormous
yeah.
attachment? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So-
they're really great at those enormous attachments.
Yeah,
with
yeah.
tons
So
of
the
beautiful
visits, the
pictures.
report, and then, an additional meeting whereby which you can kind of hear, as and Bridget said, most of them probably will be the folks that we took on, because again, they've now got the vision of what does it look like, what is ours in contrast, what can I give you for feedback that will help you? And then I think we're probably in line for a June 6th, or
That's what we're hoping for.
June-
Yes,
yeah,
June 6th
6th
is
meeting,
what we're
you know,
hoping for, yes.
for decision. Or,
Yes.
and again, that decision, I mean, you all have to, I think, work hard to figure out where you're at with that.
Yeah.
you know.
And again, that decision's a pretty early stage decision in terms of it's a general direction to give them. And
Yeah.
the real work then begins with the community and with the architects to design something that fits for everything that we're hoping for.
Yeah.
Yeah, the June 6th also in my mind, and maybe we'll get there when we talk about the agenda for next time, is I was trying to look out at what our next meeting after that would be if we missed the 6th and realized that we have not done a board calendar for next year yet. Usually around this time, don't we look at, because I was also trying to plan summer. So we might need to add that to our agenda for next time, just so that we can give some visibility out beyond that next meeting.
Yeah, typically, we've had a less intense schedule, right, Delana, in July?
We've usually had one meeting in July and
For
then,
hires kind of
yeah,
thing, yeah.
and then maybe one or two in August. Like it's been a little slower, although there've been a lot of
Yeah, July's usually been.
subcommittee meetings. There've been a lot of subcommittee meetings and phone
Yeah,
calls
right.
during July, but
Yeah, I don't know
but
that
not
that
a lot
will
of
change,
actual
but-
official board meetings, yeah.
But definitely July, we've tried to not have as many, but we've reserved some for the, hire process, right? Because we're doing some of that then as well. Yeah, so we can,
Okay.
but the next meeting in June would be, again, this is Thursday, the 6th, right?
So it'd be the
Not-
19th
Yeah, it'd be
maybe.
the 9th, yeah. So,
Okay. So any other thoughts on master planning, visioning, anything from the public on master planning and visioning? Or Gary, did you have anything else to add? Okay. All right, number 11, agenda item 11, executive limitations policy review discussion, treatment of students and parents, guardians, second reading. So this is actually an update to the policy
yeah.
itself.
So the first page you have is some changes that I'm proposing to make. I mean, I do think, this is warned for action in the next item. You could act on it if you so choose. It doesn't matter. With the, that it can either be incompliant with that, with the correction, I can't get my words right, with the compliance plan acceptable. So the proposal that I'm continuing to work on, if you look on the next page, which is actually the executive limitation score sheet, you see currently what the policy has is policies through 8, right? if you go to the sheet before that, I'm proposing to drop 7 and include 7 in 6. Because one was limiting live security video, and the other one was the use of. And so I've combined that to say, fail to limit the use of live and recorded security video to investigate inquiries related to student, staff, and community regarding safety by police, et cetera. So again, I'm not sure. I've had a brief conversation with Bridget. It's fine. I'm working to get feedback. These are sometimes hard because they're in the opposite, right? But when I want to just make sure you're clear, this is regarding treatment of student, parent, and guardians, and it's with respect to the interactions with students, parents, and guardians, or those applying to be students, parents, or guardians. The superintendent shall not cause or allow conditions, procedures, or decisions that are inequitable, untimely, vague, undignified, or unnecessarily intrusive. So the combining of this for me, that I can't fail to limit the use of the live recordings. Currently, in every office, we do have monitors, but I do limit how they can be seen by other people. They are on, but they're limited to whom can see them. Obviously, if you come into the office and walk behind a certain desk, you probably can see them, but we limit that activity. They are on. We also have limitations regarding the recording and how the process has to be done in order to do that. So I don't know. I'm happy to receive additional feedback. I continue to try to, walk the right line around how to, make sure that these are clear. So I don't know what questions, and again, I know both Martin and Bridget or Martin and Elizabeth. I'm sorry, I'm trying to call Elizabeth Bridget. Anyway, not here.
That's okay, not a worry. I was concerned that when we combined them, we kind of lost something in the translation. So, because my understanding was that 6, as it was written before, fail to limit the use of live security video systems to crisis situations and the immediate need of administrators for safety information. I felt like that part got lost when we combined it with 7, which was fail to limit the use of security video recordings to inquiries by the police about criminal investigations or by district or building administrator to ensure student.
Yeah, the police did and the administrators fell out, right?
Yeah. And so so as I would read this now, for example, it would say to me that, we talked about this earlier today, that we couldn't use live or recorded video unless it was a police criminal investigation. And that would really concern me, especially live video. So say, for example, we know there's something going on in the school and it's bad and we need to immediately look at that video to make sure we understand what's going on. I don't think that we need a step in there to call the police and ask them if it's okay that we look at that live video. And right now, to me, it reads that way. So I think I was advocating last time to combine them, but I would say something like fail to limit the use of live and recorded security video systems to either A, crisis situations and the immediate need of administrators for safety information, or to police inquiries by the police about criminal investigations. And then we could probably use the rest of what's in 7. But I just feel like we sort of went just to only the police can use this for criminal investigations, and that
It
leaves
dropped out the administration.
Yeah.
And I feel like in previous versions, it said superintendent or police chief or and/or. And
Well-
if
Well,
we
there's a
wanna,
different policy. There's a specific video camera policy that we were working on.
Okay.
And that's where this gets a little confusing.
Okay.
And that one goes into the details of the procedures about how recorded video can be accessed. And it does require a sign off from the superintendent and the police chief in order to do that.
And so that's not part of, when you look at this policy,
yeah,
it's, with respect to parents, it's about applying, it's specifically about the treatment of them and what we're doing. It's not about what all the process that I have to follow if
Yeah,
police
this
ask for
one,
it.
this one to me is basically just saying, hey, parents and guardians and students, we're not gonna just be big brother all the time watching you through video camera and, deciding that, this argument happened and we're gonna get in the middle of this argument that happened. But it's more, if there's a major safety issue, we need to be able to look at the video and see what happened or see what is happening right now. And then if there was a criminal investigation, we do have to be able to hand over that video to the police in certain instances, but we're gonna be very careful with that information and not just hand over everything all the time without some thought and some consideration.
Well, and so we
to it.
want the administrators to be able to pull the
Yeah.
trigger, so to speak, but do we then, right. But are we concerned about administration's abuse of it? In which case, do you have a post hoc police
No,
sign off? I mean, what,
no, but so that's part of the limitation, so there's limits on what you can use it for.
Yeah.
And then there's processes by which you have to go through in order to get them. You can't just walk down, because you're administrator, walk down and say, I wanna have that preserved and I want it, There's a process by which you have to go through to preserve the video and to be able to look at it. And you can't do that, we can't do that solo, absent the police. So if we wanna look at something, because there's a concern around, a significant safety matter or a criminal potential. And then we're lucky because we have school resource officers within the building. Often they're the ones that will be making the request.
so we just need to write administration back into that,
Absolutely.
right?
I think that's right, and I think you made some good suggestions on maybe the A and B. Again, we want to be careful that, one's not over the other, but.
Right.
So I hear what you're saying, and we can come back with it,
Okay.
all right?
So I think that means that we need to wait then
Yeah.
on approving the policy governance part of it too, right? Because we need to have that updated
Yeah.
before we can approve this?
Yeah, I
Okay.
think this whole thing will just come back.
That will come back next time.
Yeah, and you can tell Martin that you guys were successful in, like, the redrafting. Wasn't my intent, but you got it.
Sorry about that.
No, it's all right.
yeah. Okay, so that brings us to the second part of executive limitations policy monitoring. This one's also warned for action, but it's the first time we're seeing it. So it is on asset protection.
Yeah.
Is there anything to say about it before we?
Yeah, I don't know how familiar you are with this particular one, but again, looking at your monitoring report summary page, this is again that the superintendent shall not cause or allow the district assets to be unprotected, inadequately maintained, or unnecessarily risked. And so this walks you through specifics on how we do that in each of those policies. And so what you have in front of you is kind of the evidence associated with each one of those. So again, the interpretation, we've highlighted in yellow what's changed from the previous report for each of the policies. And then there's a pretty significant number of attachments that provide you with that validation. So I don't know what your pleasure is, Bridget, and other board members. Again, we can give you some time to do this. We can answer questions. I don't know. I mean, I think that I'm open to, I'd like to try to move some of these along for you,
Right.
and give you the opportunity to get a monitoring report
Bless
done
you.
if possible. And I think one of the things about this is important is that, again, you've seen our audit, and you've got the management letter, and so there's some things in there that, obviously, if there was major concerns, then I probably would be putting up a little bit more of the flag, but that's not the case.
One question I had, I was just looking through my notes here. One question I had, and this came up last year as well, was this cautionary rating from Bisbit. And
Yeah,
it
on
was mainly about workers' compensation. I think that came up last time. Do you have any more information on why that number is the way it is, or what's driving that, or is there any concern?
It's actually, it's improving,
Okay.
although it's still cautionary. But the explanation of why it's a cautionary rating is included in the write-up that I did.
I may have missed it, I'm sorry.
Yeah, one thing, when you look at the cautionary, of course, it's easy to say, from 17 to 18, you see the percentage go down. Going down is good, right? So when you see improvement, it's going down, the percentage is going down. I had a question from
But it's
somebody on that
still,
earlier.
it's still,
In that
it's still
land.
the biggest driver of a cautionary rating. And it's not uncommon, about a third of the 49 member districts at the meeting that was about eight months ago now, were in that, for workers' comp in that cautionary category. But we were relatively high in that. And we, there's no super explanation. The composition of our workforce, we had a high concentration in a couple of areas that we're looking at those areas individually. I don't want to publicly identify which areas they are, but we've added some additional, training. There's safe schools training that we're making sure that people are using for safe lifting, slips, trips, and falls. We've added the cold weather indicator, the ice warning indicators. You may have seen them in the parking lot over the winter. So we are taking the recommended steps from VISBIT, and we were better than we were the previous year, but we're still cautionary.
Brian or Alex, do you have any questions? I always find this one a little bit more straightforward than some of the other ones. There's a little less nuance, maybe. So are you guys comfortable if we go ahead and move it along so that we can, all right? Okay. So executive limitations monitoring report summary, 2.7 asset protection. The superintendent shall not cause or allow district assets to be unprotected, inadequately maintained, or unnecessarily risked. Reasonable interpretation? Adequate data?
Yes.
In compliance?
Yes.
Okay. Further, without limiting the scope of the foregoing by this enumeration, the superintendent shall not, first, fail to insure against theft and casualty losses to at least 80% of replacement value and against liability losses to board members, staff, and the organization itself in an amount greater than the average for comparable organizations. Reasonable interpretation?
Yes.
Adequate data?
Yes.
Yes. In compliance?
Yes.
2, allow unbonded personnel access to material amounts of funds. Reasonable interpretation? Yes. Adequate data? Yes. In compliance?
Yes.
Number 3, subject facilities and equipment to improper wear and tear or insufficient maintenance. Reasonable interpretation?
Yes.
Adequate data?
Yes.
In compliance?
Yes.
Number 4, unnecessarily expose the organization, its board, or its staff to claims of liability. Reasonable interpretation?
Yes.
Adequate data?
Yes.
In compliance?
Yes.
Number 5, make any purchase, A, wherein normally prudent protection has not been given against conflict of interest, B, of over $15,000 without having obtained comparative prices and quality, C, of over $75,000 without a stringent method of ensuring the balance of long-term quality and cost. Orders shall not be split to avoid these criteria. Reasonable interpretation?
Yes.
Adequate data?
Yes.
In compliance?
Yes.
Number 6, fail to protect intellectual property, information, and files from loss or significant damage. Reasonable interpretation?
Yes.
Adequate data?
Yes.
In compliance?
Yes.
Number 7, receive, process, or disperse funds under controls that are insufficient to meet the board-appointed auditor's standards. Reasonable interpretation?
Yes.
Adequate data?
Yes.
In compliance?
Yes.
Number 8, compromise the independence of the board's audit or other external monitoring or advice, such as by engaging parties already chosen by the board as consultants or advisors. Reasonable interpretation?
Yes.
Adequate data?
Yes.
In compliance?
Yes.
Number 9, invest or hold operating capital in insecure instruments, including uninsured checking accounts and bonds of less than AA rating at any time, or in non-interest-bearing accounts except where necessary to facilitate ease in operational transactions. Reasonable interpretation?
Yes.
Adequate data?
Yes.
In compliance?
Yes.
Almost there. Number 10, endanger the organization's public image, its credibility, or its ability to accomplish ends. Reasonable interpretation?
Yes.
Adequate data?
Yes.
In compliance?
Yes.
Number 11, change the organization's name or substantially alter its identity in the community. I hear chuckles. Reasonable interpretation?
Yes.
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 Adequate data?
Yes.
Yes.
In compliance? Yes. So normally, I guess Elizabeth reads all the details first and then goes back, but we sort of did it in the backwards order. But I think we got through.
Yeah.
So, move that one along.
Thank you.
All right, so that brings us to negotiations updates. So we are in the process, I think we gave a thorough update last time. Right now, we're just in the process of trying to schedule a fact-finding hearing. And we are having challenges doing that because of the limits of availability of fact-finders. So they are very heavily scheduled. And we've run into this in the past cycle as well because everyone's negotiating because of the limitations on how long contracts could be. So it's a bit challenging, but we are working on it. Do you have anything else to add, David? Okay. Number 14, set the agenda for the Thursday, June 6, 2019 regular meeting.
Yeah. So note, this is Thursday, June 6th, not Wednesday.
And it's at Orchard, so right day, right time, everyone.
You can take off under 10.2.7 asset protection
Yeah.
because you took care of that tonight.
Yep.
I'm thinking about master planning is on there, and Delina has been helpful to get more time there. We've got an hour in there, so
Perfect.
that's a pretty considerable amount of time. And we may be able to take a little bit more if, again, 2.1 might not take a ton of time if we made the revisions appropriately there. So,
Yep.
I don't know, we will probably, we'll have some sort of an update probably on the Rick Marcotte site, but from whatever we've made some decisions on before, it's probably the only thing that we might need to add in
It would be
there.
more of an update probably than a,
And maybe that city school goes under there as an update on Rick Marcotte stormwater, something.
Excuse me, David, do you expect a large attendance with the master planning stuff? And are you gonna need the board?
oh, because if we're at Orchard, it makes it a challenge if we don't have the right resources available.
Yeah, so again, we've been struggling with this a little bit, and we can talk about this more as a whole board, but I think we'd love to travel to the other schools, but it's difficult, to live stream is hard. There's not the same capacity there. So I'm not saying no, never, but for this meeting, maybe it would be better to bring it back to the middle school.
I'll see if I can, if you would like me to.
Yeah, I would say with regard to the smart board, I don't envision this as being
That big.
that
It's
one
mostly
being
a
a
board.
very long presentation. I think that's gonna happen at this other
Whatever
scheduled
follows.
one that we're trying to schedule the master planning only meeting, where the teachers and everybody
Yeah,
come.
because this is really decision
This
point
is really
for the
decision
board.
time, so there
to
might
give
be
a
some
direction.
debate amongst us, or, some questions for each other,
So
but I
it's up
don't
to you.
see there being like a big Dora Whittier
No.
presentation or anything like that. So it depends on what you feel about live streaming and that kind of stuff, because I do want people to be able to see that meeting clearly, but yeah, so.
Well, I think, again, we need to be sensitive to the number of things that are going on over at this school during that June period. So I would suggest we bring it back here, constant and consistent, and I think we bring it back. If we can't, then we'll keep it there. If the schedule can open for here, then we'll bring it back here.
Okay.
Because I think live streaming would be important to do it.
And did you say you were gonna roll more specialization talk into the superintendent's report, or is its own separate?
No, I
spot?
think I'll put it into, I'll put it probably by itself, or I don't know, probably superintendent's report. I don't think, it's probably a bit right under their specialization, under my report, elementary. I really should have had it on the agenda for tonight, but I didn't get it on there. So, June
Okay.
6th.
One more thing. Do we want to talk about our board calendar on June
Yes,
6th?
I was gonna ask that, the board calendar for next year.
Yeah, we can do that. We can put it under, wherever, we'll figure out where to put it.
Yeah, it probably needs
Review
its
board
own,
calendar.
board calendar item.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, any other thoughts on the agenda for next time? Okay. Number 15, future agenda items. Anyone have any thoughts about any of these items, or should we table that discussion for?
There's a lot.
There's always a lot. They always kind of stay there. It
Well,
sounds like we have a
we're gonna
pretty.
start moving on some of
Yeah.
them, so you'll see some of those.
You know, what we've taken off this is the self-assessment for the board. And we have seen, we did get that handout that was some guidelines of it, but I haven't done anything with it. I wouldn't want that to be.
Yeah, we haven't forgot about it. It just was with the things that were on this agenda, we didn't add it back in. I know that we're looking for how you want to do that. And I was going to just talk more with Elizabeth about how we want to move on that. We got to pick something, or you got to then try it, or some sort of a piece, so.
Okay. All right, number 16, the consent agenda.
Yep, so you do have a new hire report there in your packet as well, so you can see a little bit about where folks are coming in. Again, this is for the next school year, so Nicole DeMag, a 1.0 teacher at Rick Marcotte, and Alexandra Dezeno, I'm not probably enunciating that right, but 1.0, this is part of our preschool program at Rick Marcotte,
Yeah.
speech and language, and their corresponding information. And then in addition to that, you have a bid regarding the Orchard School related to their boilers, the burners. And then, that's it.
That was really it?
This is a busy time of the year, you know, you'll have a lot more on the June 6th one for additional hires.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Any questions? So
None here.
those are approved by consent. Item 17, consider the minutes of the meetings of May 1 and May 6, 2019. So May 1 was our last regular school board, full school board meeting. I had no
Yeah, I saw
comments.
nothing to object to, yeah.
Okay. All right. And May 6th was a short set of minutes for executive session, our negotiations subcommittee on May 6th. I had no changes to that.
Yeah, likewise.
Okay. So those are also approved. Item number 18, accounts payable orders number 40 and number 41. Did anyone have any questions about those?
No.
Nope. Okay. Number 19, accounts payable order check to Howard Center for Human Services in the amount of $80,017.73. So, does anyone have any questions about that?
No.
No? Do I have a motion to approve the check to Howard Center?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
You do, so moved. I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great,
Aye, aye, aye.
thank you, guys. Have a good.